Genghis Khan surrounded the richest city in the world, and what his army left behind shocked even hardened diplomats. Zhongdu in 1215 held millions of people, more wealth than most nations could imagine. A Persian ambassador arrived after the Mongols withdrew, expecting ruins, but nothing prepared him for what he actually found. He wrote down every detail he witnessed, and historians still struggle to fully process his account today. What exactly did that ambassador see when he walked through the gates of Chengdu? His name was Ibn al-Athir's contemporary, a diplomat traveling under the Khwarezmian court, sent east to read the new power reshaping the known world. He wasn't a soldier, and he wasn't a conqueror. He was a witness, which is exactly why his words carry the weight they do. When he approached those gates, he carried the assumptions of a man who had seen war's aftermath before: sieges, burned districts, the ordinary wreckage of armies. What waited inside Zhongdu was something his vocabulary barely had room to hold. In 1215, there was no city on earth quite like Zhongdu, the imperial capital of the Jin dynasty sitting at the heart of northern China. Its outer walls stretched for nearly 20 miles, enclosing a population that dwarfed every European city of the age combined. The Jin emperors had filled it with palaces, granaries, armories, and markets so vast that foreign merchants needed days just to walk them end to end. It wasn't merely a city. It was the administrative engine of an empire that commanded tens of millions of subjects across a continent. The Jin dynasty had ruled from these walls for nearly a century, and Zhongdu carried that confidence in every stone. Its garrison alone numbered in the hundreds of thousands, fed by supply chains that stretched across the Yellow River Plain. Armies had threatened northern China before, and every single one of them had eventually turned back. So when reports began arriving of a force moving out of the Mongolian steppe, the court in Zhongdu had every reason to believe this would be no different. Zhongdu had walls that could stop an army, but walls can't eat. Genghis Khan understood something that most commanders before him refused to accept: that the most powerful city in Asia could be beaten without ever being stormed. He didn't throw his horsemen against the ramparts. He wrapped the entire city in a ring of Mongol cavalry and simply waited. Every road feeding Zhongdu went dark. Every supply caravan turned back or was destroyed before it reached the gates. The Jin court, sealed inside, watched their grain reserves shrink while Genghis resupplied his armies from the countryside they already controlled. Weeks became months, and the city that once commanded tribute from half the known world was now begging its own emperor for relief that never came. Soldiers on the walls were starving before the civilians. Have you ever considered what that does to a garrison's will to fight? The defenders didn't break because the walls failed them. The walls were still standing when everything else already had. What finally brought Zhongdu down wasn't a battering ram. It was something far more human than that. The walls of Zhongdu had held for more than 2 years, and that fact alone had humiliated the greatest war machine the world had ever seen. Genghis Khan didn't break them with a single decisive assault. He broke them by making the city eat itself alive. He cut every road, every supply line, every thread connecting Zhongdu to the outside world, and then he simply waited. Inside those legendary walls, the Jin garrison watched their grain stores collapse and their soldiers begin to starve in the shadow of a city built to project power. When the Mongols finally moved, there was almost nothing left to resist them. The defenders who hadn't already deserted or died were too weak to hold a line against an army that had spent 2 years sharpening its patience. The gates came down not with a thunderclap, but with something quieter and far more terrible: the sound of a city that had already given up. And once the Mongol tide poured through those broken walls, the question wasn't whether Zhongdu would survive. It was whether anything inside it would. What came through those walls wasn't an army looking to occupy. It was a force with nothing left to prove and no reason to stop. The soldiers moved through Zhongdu's districts the way fire moves through dry timber, and the city's million residents had nowhere that was safe. Palaces that had stood for generations were stripped down to bare stone before they were put to the torch. The looting wasn't chaotic. It was systematic, coordinated, almost industrial in its thoroughness. Gold, silk, grain, horses, craftsmen who might still be useful, everything with value was cataloged and carried east. Everything else was left to burn. The killing followed the same logic: not rage, not frenzy, but a population that Genghis Khan had decided should no longer exist. Weeks passed, and the smoke above Zhongdu was still visible from a day's ride away. What do you do with a destruction that complete? How do you even begin to measure it? One man rode into the ruins and tried to write it down. Persian ambassador Ala ad-Din Atamalik Juvaini didn't write about Zhongdu from a safe distance or from secondhand reports. He walked through it himself, and what he recorded has never really left the historical record. He described the ground outside the city walls as white, not from snow, but from human bones bleached by the sun. The soil itself, he wrote, had turned to fat from the decomposition of so many bodies packed into one place. Can you imagine trying to find words for that? Standing in the middle of it, knowing you had to write it down. He wasn't cataloging a battlefield. He was describing what a city of roughly 1 million people looks like after it has been systematically emptied. The silence he conveyed wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of total erasure, a place where the noise of human life had simply been switched off. Streets that once moved with merchants and soldiers and children now offered nothing but the geometry of ruins and the smell of what conquest leaves behind. Juvaini gave historians something rare, a witness who was neither Mongol nor Jin, with no stake in softening the account. And yet even his words strain under the weight of what he saw, which raises the question of whether any number we attach to this event can actually hold its true scale. So how much of what Juvaini wrote can we actually trust? He wasn't there when the city fell, and he was writing decades after the fact, working from sources he never fully names. Historians treat his account the way a detective treats a witness statement. Useful, but never the whole truth on its own. The bones, the grease, the silence of a city that once held 1 million people. Those details feel almost too vivid to be fabricated. Archaeological surveys of the Zhongdu site have confirmed mass destruction consistent with what Juvaini described, which gives the account a harder floor than most medieval sources enjoy. But the numbers themselves, the casualty figures that appear in various chronicles, swing wildly, and scholars have never agreed on a single count. What they do agree on is that the scale was catastrophic enough to reshape the demographic map of northern China for generations. The argument isn't really about whether it was terrible. It's about whether any number we could name would actually capture what was lost. Every court from Korea to Persia received the news, and none of them fully believed it. Zhongdu had been the largest, most fortified city on Earth, and the Mongols had simply erased it. The psychological shockwave that followed wasn't just fear. It was a fundamental reordering of what rulers thought was possible. States that had trusted in walls, in armies, in sheer population size, now had to reckon with something that made all of those calculations obsolete. Genghis Khan didn't just win a battle, he demonstrated that no city was too large, no dynasty too old, and no civilization too established to survive his attention. The Persian ambassador who walked those bone-white fields didn't write a military report. He wrote a warning addressed to every kingdom that still had something left to lose. What makes Zhongdu matter today isn't the body count or the burned palaces, as staggering as both of those things are. It's that one man's ambition could hollow out 1 million lives and leave a diplomat searching for words that didn't yet exist. The fall of Zhongdu wasn't the end of something. It was the world learning for the first time what total conquest actually costs.